So let me just get straight to the questions. I will not be trying to teach you anything new in the session because it is just going to confuse you at this point of time when there is hardly like 20 days left. So what we are going to do is quickly run through the concepts and images where you can take, like from the options also you can take home something. All right, are we clear on that? Okay. So the first question says 70. Okay, the first thing that I would like to tell you all is keep a pen and a paper with you ready. Okay, because there are some things that I will be telling you that you need to kind of remember or memorize and stuff like that. So first thing, when you see such an image based question, right, especially in terms of kindly everybody mute your audios, please. Okay. So, when you see such an image-based question, basically pertaining to a syndrome or lesion or any other particular condition, what you need to give heed to in the question is that there will always be clues. Never forget, nobody will not give you a question where there are no clues at all. All right. Even if you have not seen a condition any time, just by giving a little attention to the clues in the question, you can come at the answer. Okay. So there will be things like demographics, or there will be something like clinical feature or a treatment aspect that is given that you would have read somewhere, that you can just recall and give the answer. Okay. So the first question is a 71-year-old white woman with a history of heavy alcohol use and history of smoking reported your clinic with the following clinical presentation. What is the most likely diagnosis? Okay. I shall wait like 10-15 seconds for all of you to give the answer in the chat box and then go ahead with explaining it myself. Somebody called Priyar thinks it is common cell carcinoma. Why do you think so? Can you please tell me? Confusing, isn't it? All of you are giving different answers. Yes. Not necessarily. Lateral borders with white lesions. Even leukoplakia appears on the lateral border of the tongue, actually very extensively and commonly. So, what you need to give heed to in this picture is that these erythroplakic areas that you see, these erythematous areas, this is predominantly red more than white. So we can call this an erythroleukoplakia. In the next slide coming up is how every other type of leukoplakia looks like. So then you will know a clear picture of what is what. Since this lesion is more red, see, look at all these parts, so is more red than white, we can call this as a erythroleukoplakia. So going to the next slide, you can see that homogeneous leukoplakia looks like a white plaque or a patch that is not interspersed with any red area or any other kind of, it is not interspersed with any even normal skin. It is just one white color patch. Okay. So leukoplakia non-homogeneous is that is leukoerythroplakia, not erythroleukoplakia. This is leukoerythroplakia that is mostly white and only on the lateral borders or the edges of the lesion that you see some erythema. So sorry guys. All right. So next, varicose leukoplakia will have these hairy extensions and it is also mainly very hyperkeratinized, and you can make it. Proliferative verrucous leukoplakia is an HPV associated lesion. It is multifocal, and it can be homogeneous or non-homogeneous types. Okay, so this also can be interspersed with white or red lesions. So now so far what have we learned? Erythroleukoplakia, in which the red component is more than the white component. Homogeneous leukoplakia, which is not interspersed with anything, it's just a white homogeneous patch, white uniform patch, hyperkeratinized patch. Leukoerythroplakia, where there are white components more than the red components, but the red components also exist. This is proliferative verrucous leukoplakia, where there is these hairy extensions, and proliferative verrucous leukoplakia, which looks like verrucous leukoplakia but also has nodular components and will be interspersed with red areas most of the times, and is multifocal. So quickly run through the slide. I shall give you 2 minutes. And squamous cell carcinoma, like this PR person had like a doubt, right? Squamous cell carcinoma mostly will be undermining, ulcerative, and will have everted edges. All right. So that is one characteristic feature of squamous cell carcinoma. And when you palpate the usually the skin around the transition between the ulcerated lesion and the normal mucosa will be indurated. So when such clues are given to you in the question, you can go ahead and write squamous cell carcinoma. So everybody looking at the slide. Guys, it would be better if you guys can, interact like faster, and, if you have any doubts, you can just tell. If you didn't understand anything in the previous question, you could tell. Clear so far? Everything clear so far? Okay, good. That's really nice to hear. Okay, so then I am going to actually kind of focus on, like, even if you don't know anything about that thing, you should be able to use your common sense and arrive at the answer. Let's go for such things. Okay, so the next question is kind of like that. Below depicted is a T1 weighted contrast enhanced axial MRI of a recurrent squamous cell carcinoma invading the left pterygoid plate. The moment you saw T1 weighted contrast enhanced axial MRI, most of you would have thought, I will never get this answer right. Isn't it? Guys, yes or no? Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Okay. So yeah, we don't know. We don't know what T1 weighted is. We don't know how to interpret an MRI. There is one picture there. They're asking us something. All you have to do is just calmly wait for 10 seconds and read the whole question. All right. So let's go back to the question again. Below depicted is all that is gibberish for you. Axial MRI of a recurrent SCC, blah, 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 invading the left pterygoid plate as well as the masticator space, skull base, encasing the internal carotid artery. What is the tumor staging according to TNM staging? Is what they are asking. So all of you know TNM staging, right? AJCC 8th edition, everybody is familiar, right? I hope you know that is the latest one, and all of you have to be very, very familiar with it, because most questions will come with that. You know that they've added something like depth of invasion, extra capsular spread, and everything, right? In this new 8th edition of HSCC cancer staging thing. So all of you know TNM staging. It is all about TNM staging. All that MRI thing is to just take you off track. So make sure to read the question completely. Don't lose confidence. Even if you use your common sense here, like to see the MRI image, even if you don't know how to read one, can you all see my mouse pointer? Okay, all right. You can see on this side there are a lot of boundaries, right? Like it's intact. It's intact. All of it is intact on the normal side. On this side, there is all hotspots. There are no boundaries. Everything is gone, and it is invaded by one whole huge mass. To make it easier for you, they have also marked it. Okay. So now tell me the staging. If all this is involved, then what could be the staging of the tumor? Any more answers? I'll wait for 10 seconds. Very good. Those who have got C, that is D for B, is the answer. This is the tumor category for non-human papilloma virus associated OSCC 8th edition cancer staging module. Kindly note it down or take a picture. Make sure to memorize it, because any like regarding staging, it could get a little confusing when they ask you outright, and they could twist questions also like this. So it is very important to know this by heart and understand. Actually, it is quite easy to understand if you go a little bit in depth, but right now there's no point, there's no time to go over concepts like that. You don't have the time to sit and study the whole of oral cancer. So just go through the staging at least, like 2-3 days once, and make sure you're just going over it again and again and again. Is that okay? Clear? So you can see that T4B is exactly described there in the question. It is invaded the masticator space, pterygoid plates or skull base, or may not encase the internal carotid artery. So T4B stage is completely described in the question. Okay. So shall we move on to the next one? Everything clear in this question? So you could just like take a snap of this or whatever. These are a few landmarks that you will see on the mid-axial section of an MRI. If in case they ask you about landmarks, you could use this. This comes by practice. The interpretation comes by practice, and also repeatedly looking at MRI images. But you could try to at least look at it like repeatedly, and at least have an idea as to where what comes, so that you will be able to kind of recognize it later. So if an image based question comes, if they tell you point at an arrow and say what is the structure, at least roughly you should have an idea using your anatomy knowledge and this image per se, because as and when the slices changes, it is a huge process. Like as and when the slice changes, the structures that are seen also changes. But this is a mid axial section, so you can just have a quite good idea as to what and all is where, so that you will be able to kind of answer such questions. That is the point of this picture. I'll give you 10 seconds to kind of look at it and take a snapshot, snapshot or whatever of it. Let me know when I can move on from this slide. I will do so. Shall I move on? Okay. Okay, I went a little little overboard with oral cancer in this session. Okay, let's go ahead with the next question. This says, identify the lesion depicted below, noted in a patient who suffered from stage 4 oropharyngeal cancer 6 months ago. First, I want you all to tell me what is the major clue in this question. I want to know if you have understood that or not. All right, I'm getting a few answers. That's good, but I want to know if you're like able to. Very good, Varshini. Why do you think so? The time period is the important clue that they have given you. Yeah, but look at the mucosa there. It is also blanched, like kind of, there is mucositis and stuff like that, isn't it? Or like there is fibrosis, the patient is not able to open it or stuff. Yes. Osteoradionecrosis is the right answer. You can see here that there is a part of the exposed bone, and also there is some dental procedures that are done to the patient. So these are the two clues, both, and the time period, of course, because osteoradionecrosis is a very late complication of radiation therapy. The job that the bones that are affected are usually within the radiation field. It presents clinically as a painful or a painless non-healing bone exposure within the irradiated field. On histopathology, there have been questions that have come up on histopathology of ORN. There will be hypoxic, hypovascular, and hypocellular bone tissue that is seen on histopath. There was also a question where it was asked that osteoradionecrosis results in patients who took how much dosage of radiation, cumulative radiation therapy. So if you guys are noting it down, this is that like when I'm explaining, I'll be giving you out like few important points that you can write down. Anybody who has received more than 50 grays of radiation, cumulative radiation therapy, is susceptible to osteoradionecrosis if they're subjected to dental trauma or any other secondary trauma to the bone. All right. So the basic treatment for ORN will be antibiotics, lavage, and everything, saline lavage and everything. Also, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There was one question that I came across. Let me just put it across to all of you. HPO therapy, say the patient has come to you with oropharyngeal cancer. You're treating the tumor is not huge enough. The oncologist missed a PET scan. Let's say they will not, but let's say the oncologist missed a PET scan and did not look for metastasis. What they did was start off on radiotherapy. The tumor shrunk. Okay, the tumor shrunk. The patient is all right. But then osteoradionecrosis resulted because the patient underwent a traumatic extraction. Then what they did, let's face it, corporates are like that, corporate hospitals. So they gave him hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Suddenly, the tumor flared up. The patient reported with cachexia 3 months later, severe tiredness, etc. What could have happened? Did you all understand my question? It's still 6. I was just answering a question in the chat box. Did you all answer or understand my question? Hyperbaric oxygen therapy was given. PET scan was missed. Okay, let me just tell you the sequence. Reported with SCC, PET scan was mixed. Then ORN happened. Hyperbaric oxygen was given. Tumor flared up. So what could have happened here? Guys, come on, it's easy. Is the question clear? No, not that. The tumor flared up, the patient is alive. He has cachexia. Yeah, of course, wrong diagnosis. The oncologist didn't do the PET scan. No? Why is a PET scan done? What is the indication for a PET scan? Exactly. So secondaries or metastasis was not detected. So what happened? These secondaries remained, and when hyperbaric oxygen therapy was given, it increased the angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is one of the major steps in tumor cell multiplication. If you all remember your general pack, isn't it? So when hyperbaric oxygen therapy was given, these secondaries flared up, and ultimately it would have, resulted in a huge lot of mess. So it's very important to do all investigations, come to a proper staging if you see any kind of such lesion, and look for secondaries. Okay, is that clear? The point here was hyperbaric oxygen therapy is contraindicated in metastatic disease because it promotes angiogenesis. This is what I wanted to put across to you. Understood? Is that clear, all of you? Okay, so let's go to the next question. Identify the syndrome associated with facial nerve depicted below. So can I get answers for this, please? Is it Melkersson-Rosenthal syndrome, Mobius syndrome, Guillain-Barré syndrome, or Lyme's disease? It's Mobius syndrome. See, the conditions, these all the information that I'll give you from now, like whatever I give you beyond the question could also be potential questions. So make sure to heed attention to those. All right. So the conditions that affect the facial nerve can be divided into unilateral conditions and bilateral conditions. Can all of you name a few unilateral conditions? Like one side of the face is affected. Such kind of lesions? No. Lesion damage to facial nerve that lead to only unilateral effect, like it will get affected only on one side. All right, the other things are also correct, But facial nerve problems that lead to affecting the one side of the face. So we can roughly, when it comes to facial nerve, the things can be divided as unilateral and bilateral. So in unilateral conditions, there are things like Bell's palsy, sarcoidosis, yes, leprosy, and HIV infection-related facial nerve palsy, your herpes zoster, Ramsay Hunt, and everything. All right, they're all unilateral conditions. Whereas bilateral conditions include your Michelson-Rosenthal syndrome. Both sides of the face are affected. Mobius syndrome and Guillain-Barré syndrome. All right. Lyme's disease also comes under your unilateral lesion affecting one side of the face. So coming to Mobius syndrome, it is a rare congenital condition characterized by the absence or underdevelopment of both abducens and facial nerve. So this itself could be a potential question. The earliest clinical feature includes the inability of the newborn to suckle, because the facial nerve, the facial muscles, the muscles of facial expression that is innervated by your facial nerve has reached a state of spasticity. Okay, so the newborn will not be able to suckle, and the patient and as and when the patient grows, like stuff like that, they'll not be able to smile, they'll not be able to frown, and all these problems, and they will have this stiff face appearance. Why this happens is, one of the causes is transient ischemic or hypoxic insult to the fetus. This is why this Mobius syndrome might happen. There is no clear cut this thing that this is the particular reason. Correct. So this could be one of the reasons why Mobius syndrome could happen. So in this, there could be three potential questions, such as which of the following is not a unilateral condition affecting the facial nerves, or which of these is not a bilateral condition or is a bilateral condition, or what is Mobius syndrome? Is it inherited or not? It okay, it is inherited, right? It is congenital. And then, of course, about Melkersson Rosenthal syndrome, all of you know, right? Isn't it? So, coming to the next question. Again, there is something like MRI. I'll give you all 10 seconds to just go through the question, and you should tell me that if you understood anything or not. Again, you look at the image, you feel like, oh my God, I've never seen an ultrasound in the whole of my life. How will I ever be able to interpret this? Isn't it? Meghna, you can put your concern out in the chat box. Okay, so what is your guess? Can I get some answers? See, this is where the examiners catch you. They all got you thinking that it is some pathological condition there. But it is not necessary that there is a pathology all the time in the given thing. If you just applied your anatomy knowledge to this, you also know that in the parotid region there are many important vessels that pierce through the parotid fascia and in and around, right? That also looks like hypoechoic area. only, like black areas. So it need not be a cyst. Am I making my point clear? Like all of you are clear till now? Are you all on the same page? Yes. So the take home message for this question was, first of all, no need to panic because you saw an ultrasonograph there. Second, not necessary that always that there is a pathology in the given picture. You don't have to look for anything abnormal. You can look for normal things also. So have that mindset when you're looking at anything like this. Even in some pictures where they give you like identify the condition depicted below, it could just be Fordyce's granules. You'll be thinking of somewhere out of the box. It could be some tumor, some big thing. But no, it is not. It would just be something very, very, very simple. So just go from simple stuff and then apply, go ahead and rebuilding on whatever you know about that. So going to the thing, I put an anatomical picture as well and the ultrasonography picture as well. So you can roughly memorize like where comes what in this. It's very difficult, it takes practice. Like you should see a lot of pictures, then only you will be able to tell. But two is your external carotid artery. All right. So basically concentrate on the take home message. That is important right now when you're going to tackle all these MCQs in the exam. Yes, very good. I was thinking why nobody answered that. Just read the question properly. And on examination, 2-6 was found to be deeply carious. That was put in there purposefully. That is the cause of the pain. Hope that was answered. Is that clear? This is where they pull your legs. This is where they confuse you. So the point is to not get confused. If it was a pain of parotid origin, they would have talked to you about swelling. Since when the swelling or is there any systemic signs? Silidinitis, silectis, everything. Sometimes if it is mumps or something like that, the patient will have either swelling or will have, if it is an infection, will have fever, fatigue, such things. All right. So pay attention to very, very minor details in the question also. Okay. So is it getting easier to like kind of approach questions now? Yes. So in your first year videos, you would have drawn the parotid region diagram like 1,000 times, but still in a radiographic image, it all looks very hodgepodge, and you will be like, oh my God, where is what? You just need to like kind of superimpose both the images and kind of think what might come here and how it would look. So just go, like this applies for all the like advanced imaging techniques like CT, MRI, USG, your PET CT, everything. There are very simple tables even on the internet for that matter, where they will tell you what each thing appears like. The bone appears hyperechoic, the nerves, vessels, and everything hypoechoic, the muscles are in between. So such things will be there. So if you have an idea as to where what comes and how it appears, you'll be able to visualize it very better and comprehend it very better when you come down to answering such questions. The point is to not get panicked and think, oh my God, I don't know. You will know. You just have to comprehensively think about what all you know, what all you have studied. Come on, you would have marked up the whole of Pulse by now, if I'm not wrong, right? Yes or no? So you know everything. Everything is there at the back of your head. All you need to do is superimpose everything quickly and get to the answer. Sunny, where do you want me to add you? Okay, next. According to Suzuki and Tsuchihashi's classification of lip prints, which type is depicted in the picture below? Sunny, you can join Karaunich Telegram group. We have a channel on Telegram. You can follow us on Instagram. And if you want our app, it is there on the Play Store. You can just download that there, and all the questions and everything is there itself. All right. No, the first thing I want to know is how many of you have heard of this? And what is this pertaining to? All of you kindly mute your audios. Okay. Very good, Varshini. Yes, it is a part of forensic odontology. And in that, there's a thing called keloscopy where they identify things by lip prints, and Suzuki and Tsuchihashi's classification is one of the important classifications in the same. Okay, so this is something. See, even though the previous questions were like, somehow I will arrive at the answer. This question is something that you either know or don't know, right? There is no in between. You cannot tell I will use my anatomy concepts or physiology concept or something else, superimpose things and arrive at the answer. It is very factual. You either know the classification or you don't know the classification. Okay, so this is where the distinction between people who have studied the whole thing and people would have thought like, who will ask questions from forensic odontology? I don't want to study that is. So there's no need to kind of panic. Answer everything in the paper that you already know. Keep such questions at the end. If you don't know, then think, probably you will kind of recall somewhere when your oral pathology teachers would have told you this, or just, like, what the heck, let me go by chance and answer something and come back and pray that it should be correct. All right, there could be such questions as well. So but never panic. Keep them for the last, like either you know or don't know questions, and then think over it and kind of answer and come back. All right, so the answer is type 3, that is D. This is the classification. I'll give you all 2 minutes to go over it. Kind of quickly memorize it or take a snapshot. So shall we move on? Is everything clear till now? Useful. All right then. I didn't want to overwhelm you all with a lot of questions. So I've stuck to like very uh, basic like type of questions where I can tell you like take home messages as to how to tackle image-based question. Okay, so that was the point. All right, the next question. Identify the lesion depicted in the picture below, noted in a 40-year-old male patient, and it is asymptomatic. This is the information they have given you. So look for clues in the question and in the picture, like the location, size, and everything, and the options, and rule out your options and tell me the answer. People who are thinking it is B, quickly tell me the demographics for AOT. Yes, it is nasopalatine duct cyst. It is usually seen in middle-aged male patients. There's a huge male predilection as to 4:1, right? It is due to the remnants of the nasopalatine duct. AOT is seen in young teenage girls in the anterior maxilla, usually, all right? Pilar cysts are seen on the scalp. So if you know what the others are, it is easier to rule out. It is always diagnosis by exclusion. Remember that. So and try to relate things between the question, options, and the image given to you. The triage, that initial triage of triage is what? Collecting information, right? So quickly spend like the first 10-15 seconds when you look at a question in doing a triage. That is, first you pick up the clues from the question, then you go over the image and see what is correlating with the question, then you quickly go to the options and think and rule out whatever is not at all possible there. All right, then you like in Khan Banega Crorepati, there's that 50-50 option, right? This is definitely not a dermoid cyst. This is definitely not a pilar cyst. You have ruled it over. Now you're just left with two options: nasopalatine duct cyst and an AOT. But somewhere you would have read that, like AOT occurs in young girls, not in 40-year-old males. I'm not saying it will not at all, but usually. Okay. So probably it is nasopalatine duct cyst. It is that. Okay. So that is how, yes, sometimes symptomatic also, if the expansion is too much. Otherwise, it is asymptomatic most of the times. So that is how you will arrive at that answer. I want you all, for not just image-based questions, for all the questions that is given in your NEET MDS, the 10-15 second triage on a question is very, very, very important. You're not losing out on time there. You're saving yourself from giving wrong answers in haste. All right. So just think, calmly think, you will arrive at it. If you want, apply the KBC logic and do it. Okay, so now let me see how many can answer this. Identify the below depicted aid used to test visual abnormalities. This is because I wanted to teach you all something new. All right. Oh, that's great. All of you know this. That's very good that all of you know this. Yes, it is Ishihara's color plates. Can someone tell me why it is used? Like it is used to observe what kind of abnormalities? I mean, what kind of visual abnormalities? Very good. Yes, it is used for color blindness. Yes, good. This is also one of those you know or you don't know kind of questions. Okay. So since all of you know how it is used, and let me just quickly tell you how, because there are these red and green spots, right? There are different numbers written on these plates in different shades of green, red, and orange. So people who can see some colors are categorized as one. See, people who cannot see the number are categorized as another. So that's that whole process. But as long as you know that this thing is used to test or assess color blindness, it is more than enough. So just a quick information about the rest of the options. You can just go through this. The Amstel grid test checks for macular degeneration, a disease that causes loss of vision in the center of the visual field. The tangent screen is used to map a patient's peripheral vision. All right. And perimetry is used to check the visual field, the complete visual field. So coming to the, is that clear? All of you are clear with that? I just wanted you guys to be familiarized with the other options as well, if in case they ask anywhere else in the NEET exam. Are we clear till now? All right. So identify the diagnostic aid depicted below to test pulp vitality. What is this? Sham, why do you think it is A? See, smart. This the actual point of this question was that itself. When you have seen the other things, you know them, but there's one thing that you totally don't know and you've never seen it, it's not familiar. That could be the answer sometimes. All right. So yeah, and also you have to look at the thing properly. Before this, like, how many of you would have been like familiar with your QHS Pro by camera? No, right? So you just have to like quickly think. You have to be on your fingertips and think. I've seen a pulse oximeter. Shah Rukh Khan wears that in Kal Ho Na Ho when he's dying. It is not that. A trans illuminator is like a fiber optic probe with the light at the end. And tooth sloth is always used with that crack tooth test that much. Okay, in the clinic, we just use an ice cream stick, something like that. So this could be who has pro by camera. So that is the way that you have to train yourself to think. That is very, very, very important. All right. So, so if you're clear on that, just let me go to a little about Hughes Pro by camera. It is capable of detecting temperature changes as small as 0.1 degree Celsius, and it has also been used to measure pulp vitality experimentally. It is still in the experimental stages, and measures blood flow in the pulp, and it gives us the true measurement of pulpal status. For those of you who don't know, a tooth sleuth looks like this. It works like it is it is used to apply pressure while biting. When the patient removes, he will experience pain. Okay, it's the same as the crack tooth test. And the trans illumination is like used to, the fiber optic probe is used and the light passes through that side if there is a crack. So are we clear on everything that is discussed till now? Was it any useful, like in terms of information and how to tackle the questions? So, all right, that was my last question. My point was right now to, not make you panic or anything. You will always know the answer. You should just know the ways to arrive at it. That's it. All right. It is always there at the back of your head. You do it either by exclusion or, using your common sense or doing that quick triage, like I told you. Starting what, like the first slide, is it? So it is very important to keep that in mind. Okay. And Crownage has these exclusive mock test series where we have been thriving to kind of include all these questions, like image based questions, not these questions per se, but image based questions, application based questions, teaching you how to exactly arrive at the answer with appropriate explanations. So take it. It is very important to simulate a final exam environment right now, so that you train yourself and your brain to do and face that exam that is not very far away from now on. That's what I'm trying to tell Sham. The thing is, like, that's what I told you. Train your mind. Take as many mock tests as possible. You should be able to solve 240 questions in the given 3 hours very, very effectively to get that seat. So, what you have to do right now in the last few days is to just train your mind taking mock tests. Sit, solve 240 questions. The questions you didn't understand, or at least take one mock test per day. One mock test per day. You will also learn something new from the explanations. You will know where you're doing the mistake, like the time management or anything. All right. So you have to simulate that environment right now. If you can study new things, but there's really less time to learn anything new right now. All right. So all the best, all of you. I'm sure all of you will do well. Okay. So take care. Let's meet once before probably exam and talk about how things are going. We have we have a few videos coming up on mental health and how to handle stress at this moment this week. So take up the Crownage mock test. There are a lot of them and a lot of predicted questions in that. So take care and all of you do well. All right. Make us proud. See you all then. Hope the session was useful, guys, both informatively and how to tackle such questions.